Welcome dear students to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K.S. Nagaraja of Deccan College, Pune. I am teaching historical linguistics for you. In this module, we look at the sound change and its effects. This is part 2. In this particular module, we are concentrating on the type of changes which have impact on the phonemic structure of the language. Therefore, it is called paradigmatic changes. The phonemes are established normally based on the ability of the sounds to distinguish one word from the other if the replacement takes place in a particular position. So this is what is called paradigmatic aspect or paradigmatic relation. So when a sound changes, what is the impact of it in the system? That is what is very important. In the earlier module, though we saw the two types of changes like chronological and syntagmatic, they do not really affect the phonemic system of the language. It is only this particular aspect, paradigmatic aspect, has that power of change. So that needs to be studied. In this particular module, we look at the various types of that one, and also, of course, we look at the morphophonemic changes which can take place in the languages. Because when two morphemes come together, the sounds do undergo changes. What type of changes they undergo, that will be studied in this particular module. So, paradigmatic relationship. There are mainly 5 different ways in which the effects of change on a sound could alter its paradigmatic relationship with other sounds occurring in that language. They are complete merger, partial merger, allophonic reassignment, split, and phonemic shift. Of these, the second, namely partial merger, is a combination of merger and split. The third, that is allophonic reassignment, is a special case in which split is combined with the replacement in which only one of the two sounds occur earlier, or it takes place in all environment excepting the one in which only one of the occurred ones. And the sound that was occurring in it earlier would be replaced by the sound that was not occurring in that environment. Thus, the above 5 effects of change on the paradigmatic relationship of sounds could be explained with the help of 3 distinct processes. They are merger, split, and replacement. Of these, merger affects the relationship directly by nullifying it. Split affects it by introducing a new relationship which did not exist in the language earlier. And replacement affects it by combining with split and thereby changing the characteristics of the relationship. Some illustrations could be provided. Complete merger. Sanskrit sa and sha have completely merged into sa in Hindi and many other Indo-Aryan languages. Because of that, this contrast of Sanskrit obliterated completely in Hindi. Shata, so becomes here. Shata means 100 in Sanskrit, becomes so in Hindi. Shrun, to hear, in Sanskrit becomes sun in Hindi. Dasha means 10 in Sanskrit, becomes das in Hindi. Sapta from Sanskrit which means 7 becomes satta in Prakrit, and then in Hindi it becomes sat. So here we have a case of compensatory lengthening. Sarva of Sanskrit, which means all, becomes Sarva in Prakrit and then Sab in Hindi. Like this, we have instances of complete merger in languages. Then initially, Ka and Cha merged together to Cha in Telugu before palatal vowels, and this has led to the partial obliteration of the contrast that had existed earlier between these two segments. For instance, the protoform Kiru changes in Telugu to Chiru, means cry, so Ka changes to Cha before palatal vowels. Kenayu means touch, becomes Chenayu in Telugu, etc. The obliteration is partial as it occurred only before palatal vowels. Elsewhere, the contrast remained intact. So, Kanu to see, Chenu to go, Kullu to prick, Chuttu to rap, etc. illustrate this aspect. Partial merger is the type where the merger takes place only in one environment, but it doesn't take place in other environments. So, to that extent, the system is affected. For instance, a sound Ka of Sanskrit has merged with Ha medially in Prakrit, whereas it has remained intact initially. So let us look at some of the examples. Sanskrit Nakha becomes Naha in Prakrit. Now this Ka has changed to Ha in Prakrit. It means nail. Similarly, Mukha becomes Muha, which means face. Similarly, Hasta becomes Hatta, that means hand. So in all these cases, what we see is that in the first two, the aspirated stops have become unaspirates, and the fricative part is retained, Ha, whereas in the third one, there is a case of assimilation actually. Sata becomes Tata. Let us look at the second group, Kata and Kaya. Kaya means ditch. Kata is Sanskrit, Kaya is Prakrit. Here we see that Ka remains same. Similarly, Khadga becomes Khagga, means sword. Iha means Iha, here. So when we compare these two sets, particularly the first two forms of A and all the forms of B, what is interesting is that only in the medial position this merger is taking place, Kha and Ha merge to Ha. Whereas in the initial position there is no merger, Ka remains Kha, Ha remains Ha. So that's why it is called partial merger. The third type, allophonic reassignment. The sound Pa, the proto-Pa of Indo-European, has become Fa in Germanic, except when it was preceded by Sa. In this latter environment, it has remained as Pa, whereas the sound Ba, which did not occur after Sa, also has become Pa in Germanic throughout. As a result of this second change, the sound Pa that occurred after Sa and remained as Pa got allophonically reassigned to this latter sound in the Germanic languages, giving rise to allophonic reassignment. The another type is split. We can look at some examples from Sanskrit. We have sounds Ka and Cha. In fact, they are connected. When we may look at these forms, when a vowel, front vowel occurs after Ka, Ka is a velar sound. cha is a palatal sound. Ka, ga or velar, cha, ja are palatal. Originally, ka and ga could occur before front vowels and other vowels also without any change, but at some time ka and ga start changing to become palatal ones when they occur before palatal sounds. And when later on the conditioning factor of the front vowel gets lost, then finally what we have is that a shift has taken place, ka changing to cha and ga changing to ja. So that way that affects the system. Another example can be, in fact is connected with the Sanskrit, Proto-Indo-European kwa, a reconstructed form kwa, has split into ka and cha in Sanskrit. The distinction between these two sounds was non-contrastive to begin with. As long as the conditioning was there, it became contrastive when the vowels o and a occurring after them respectively merged with a, and the contrast represented by the a-o distinction shifted to ka-cha distinction. So Proto-Indo-European reconstructed form kwa has split into ka and cha in Sanskrit. The distinction between these two sounds was non-contrastive to begin with. It became contrastive when the vowels o and a occurring after them respectively merged into a, and the contrast represented by the a-o distinction shifted to the ka-cha distinction. So Sanskrit cha means end, Latin que, pancha, five, king, etc. provide the illustration. Next we have compensatory lengthening. This change is related to vowels and consonants. The situation involves a vowel which is followed by two consonants. When one of the consonant is dropped, the vowel is lengthened in compensation for the last phoneme. In formal terms, CL is usually expressed as V C1 C2 changes to V long C2. Compensatory lengthening is common in Indo-European languages. In fact, earlier also we have illustrated it from Indo-Aryan languages. Sapta becoming satta, becoming sat involves this kind of compensatory lengthening. Here an example is given from Celtic to Irish. A similar situation is there. Some examples can be seen here. Similarly, pre-Old English form uns changing to oos, guns changing to goes would be of this type. Sanskrit, again we have hasta becoming hatta, becoming hat, etc. belong to this type. From another point of view, this can be considered as a case of monophonization as well. The second one is called phonemic shift. This can be partial or complete. Let us take some examples first of all. In fact, Punjabi is a good example for this. Sanskrit dhuma, Punjabi it becomes tua, smoke. Dhana, wealth, becomes tan. Ghata becomes kara, pitcher. Bhakta becomes pat, means boiled rice. Jhatiti becomes chat, at once. Taila, that is tel in Punjabi, is oil. Tantu becomes tand, thread. Karma becomes kam, work. Patra becomes patta, means leaf. Now what is important here is that Sanskrit had voiced aspirates dha, gha, bha, jha, whereas you notice that in Punjabi they have been replaced by, or they have shifted to voiceless unaspirates ta, ka, pa, cha. So this and interestingly, the aspiration which was there on the consonants of Sanskrit has been shifted to the vowel in Punjabi, the vowel following the voiceless consonants. In fact, they get a falling tone. That's how Punjabi has developed a tone at the expense of voiced aspirates. The contrast between voiced aspirated and voiceless unaspirates was partially shifted to the following vowels in Punjabi as a result of 1. The devising and de-aspiration of initial voiced aspirates, which made them identical with the respective voiceless unaspirates, and 2. The lowering of the pitch of the vowels that followed the voiced aspirates, which made them different from the respective vowels that occurred after the voiceless unaspirates. In fact, a case of Kannada given earlier, pa changing to ha is a good example. Palu, milk in old Kannada changes to halu in new modern Kannada is such one. In fact, many more can be added to that. Effects of sound change on morphophonemic alternation. This is another important section in this unit. A sound change may partly or completely obliterate a morphophonemic alternation. It may alter its nature. It may even introduce new alternation into a language. If an alternating set of instances is connected with a single set of non-alternating instances, or if it has no connection whatsoever with any non-alternating sets of instances, it would represent an automatic alternation. If, on the other hand, an alternating set of instances is connected with two different sets of non-alternating instances, that is, if both the sounds involved in a given alternation occur in sets of non-alternating instances in the relevant environments, it would represent a non-automatic alternation. If, on the other hand, an alternating set of instances is connected with two different sets of non-alternating instances, that is, if both the sounds involved in a given alternation occur in sets of non-alternating instances in the relevant environments, it would represent a non-automatic alternation. The Sanskrit alternation given below shows tada occurring in the final or intervocal environments is an automatic alternation. There are in these environments a set of alternating instances showing the tada alternation, and also a single set of non-alternating instances showing a tata relationship as shown below. So, taking Sanskrit example, sampat, sampada, it is alternating instances. Tada alternation we see between nominative and ablative forms. Sampat, sampada, vipat, vipada, sharat, sharada, etc. are of this type. The second one, non-alternating instance, we see sat, sata, sat to being, marut means wind, marut, maruta, sarit, river, sarita, etc. Some illustrations can be provided. We can take first of all English language, where this kind of situation is available. In the first set, wife, wives, leaf, leaves, half, house, we see an alternation of fa type, so this is a type of alternating type. In the second one, we have instances of fa only. That means there is no alternation. For instance, cliff becomes cliffs only. We cannot have a voiced one there. Then the third one, there is non-alternating instances with va. So believe, believes, give, gives, cave, caves. In here we see that y is both in the left side and the right side. That is non-past in the root and in the past constructions. In the present construction. So we have three sets: alternating set, non-alternating set, and the instances with no alternation at all, like cliff, cliffs, cave, caves. So when we have this kind of situation, we call it an automatic alternation. English provides a good example for non-alternating alternation. It shows an alternation between word final for and the word medial word that is non-automatic. There are instances showing this alternation, but in addition to this, there are also instances that do not show this alternation. The latter have either the sound for but word finally as well as word medially, or the sound were in both those environments. So some examples: word medial wife, this is for alternating, wife becoming wives in word final position, so we get a for alternation here. Leaf, leaves, half, house, etc. Non-alternating with instance with for, cliff, cliffs, there is no change, for remains same both in the final position and final positions. In the non-alternating instance with were, believe, believes, give, gives, cave, caves. So we have two non-alternating sets with one alternating set. Summary: in this chapter, 4 different ways in which the effects of sound change on the sounds of a language can be viewed. The first 3 of these represent 3 different ways in which we can view the relationship between the changing sounds and their environments, whereas the last one represents the effects that sound changes can leave behind on the phonological system of languages. It is of some importance to note that there are 4 different ways in which one and the same set of sound changes can be viewed. They are not therefore exclusive of one another. And a similatory change, for example, may involve the introduction of an alternation into a language. Similarly, the loss of a set of sounds may lead to the loss of a set of contrasts. Similarly, it is of some significance to note the distinction between non-phonemic, that means phonetic, versus phonemic changes. While the first type does not affect the phonemic system of a language, as illustrated above, the latter will have some effect on the phonemic system, depending upon the type of change involved, as detailed above. We have looked at the forms, the various types of paradigmatic changes as well as morphophonemic changes. We may examine the following 2 sets of verbal forms taken from a language called Kudukh. Kudukh is a Dravidian language, in fact belonging to what is known as Northern Dravidian language. Here we have 2 sets. The first part, the left side, contains the infinitive forms, and the right side contains a construction, first person singular, past tense construction. So Erch becomes Erchkan, I search. To search becomes I searched. Lebd, to throw, becomes libdkan, I threw. Elks, to laugh, becomes erskan, I saw. Air, to see, becomes irkan, I saw. Og, to swim, becomes ukkan, I swam. Olks, to write, becomes ukskan, I wrote. On, to ask, becomes onkan, I asked. Padg, to scold, becomes padkan, I scolded. Wank, to cough, becomes unkan, I coughed. Mek, to call, becomes mikkan, I call. Tat, to lick, becomes tatkan, I licked. So, in the first set, we look at the vowels. A changes to E, so we have AE alternation. Similarly, in the second set also, we notice the same thing, but now it is in the medial position. In the third set, we have an alternation between A versus A in the initial position. In the fourth one, we see the alternation is between the long A versus long E. In the fifth one, long O versus long U. In the sixth one, short O versus short U. And in the next one, we have long A versus long A, the bold I. So here we see that short and long vowels have similar alternations. So we need to find out what is the basic form and what is the modified form, or what is involved here. When the morphophonemic changes are there, we need to find out if there are unchanging forms also that will help us to identify what may be the original sound concern. So the students can take up the clue and try to solve the problem at their leisure time. To summarize then, in this chapter, we have looked at 5 different ways in which the effects of sound change on the sounds of a language can be viewed. The first 3 of these represent 3 different ways in which we can view the relationship between the changing sounds and their environments, whereas the last 2 represent the effects that sound changes can leave behind on the phonological system of languages. So the sound changes are very important in understanding how languages change in due course of time. Now there are other types of changes also. They will be taken up step by step in the other modules. Thank you.